All right, today we're going to dig into something that affects every single one of us, how governments borrow money. But the real story, the part that's kind of wild, is where that money actually comes from. And I think the answer is going to surprise you. I mean, sure, we all know about taxes, right? That's obvious. But when you look at the gigantic scale of government spending, we're talking roads, healthcare, massive social programs, you got to wonder, where is all that cash really coming from, especially when taxes don't even cover it all? And that's exactly what we're going to unpack here. We're going to cut through all the complex financial jargon and show you that the true source of all this money is actually a lot closer than you might think. So, let's start at the very beginning. How does this whole thing work? Well, it all kicks off with a simple promise. A promise that's made today, but one that will have to be fulfilled by people many, many years from now. This is the core idea right here. Government debt, you might hear it called treasury bills or government bonds, it's basically just an IOU. The government says, hey, give us some money today and we promise we'll pay you back down the road, plus a little extra for your trouble. This is what happens when a government wants to spend more money than it's bringing in through taxes that year. You know, it could be for something really important, like building new highways that everyone will use for decades. Or maybe it's to jumpstart the economy during a recession. But no matter the reason, when there's a shortfall, borrowing is almost always the way they fill that gap. And you know, when they say at a later date, they're not talking about next week. We could be talking 10 years, 20 years, sometimes even 30 years into the future. That's an entire generation away. They are, quite literally, borrowing money from the future. Okay, so if the government is the borrower, then who's the lender? Who's handing over all this cash? Well, the answer is pretty interesting, not because of who's on the list, but because of who isn't. So take a look at this list of buyers. We're talking about huge, stable institutions. The pension fund that holds your retirement money, the bank where you keep your savings, even the governments of other countries. They all buy this debt because, believe it or not, it's considered one of the safest investments on the entire planet. But wait a second. Here's the key question. A government doesn't really make anything, not like a company that sells cars or software. All the government really produces are promises. So what, or maybe who, is actually backing up that promise? And there it is, the ultimate guarantee on all that borrowed money, it's you. This is exactly how it works. That promise to pay the money back is only good because the government has the power to tax people in the future. It's a claim on the money you're going to earn, the money your kids are going to earn, and the entire economy's growth for decades to come. Okay, so eventually those IOUs have to be paid. The bill always comes due. And when it's time to settle up, a government has a surprisingly short menu of options. In fact, there are really only 3 ways to do it. And here they are. A government can raise your taxes, it can cut the services it provides, or it can just create new money out of thin air. That's it. There is no magic 4th option. So let's quickly look at what each one of these really means for you. So, option 1 is the most direct one, right? The government just raises taxes, income tax, sales tax, you name it. The result is pretty simple. You work just as hard, but your paycheck gets smaller. You take less home. Now, option 2 feels a little different, but the end result is kind of the same. Your tax bill might not change, but what you actually get for your money starts to shrink. We're talking less funding for schools, for healthcare, for fixing roads. You pay the same, but you get less in return. And that brings us to the 3rd option. And as our source material puts it, this is the sneaky one. This is a way of paying the bill that you might not even see happening, but you will absolutely feel the effects. And that is inflation. Instead of taking money out of your paycheck, the government's central bank just creates more money. All this new cash floods into the economy, and it makes every single dollar you've saved worth a little bit less. Your salary might look the same on paper, but its purchasing power, what you can actually buy with it, goes down because prices for everything else go up. It really is a silent tax. So, if these are the only options, and let's be honest, they all sound pretty painful for regular people, then why on earth do governments get so deep into debt? Well, it all comes down to a very simple and very powerful political incentive. See, the magic of government debt for a politician is that it neatly separates the fun part from the painful part. They get to announce brand new roads, popular programs, and all these great benefits today, and of course get votes for it today. the pain of paying for it all, the higher taxes, the cuts, the inflation, that gets pushed down the road, usually for someone else to deal with long after they're out of office. This analogy from the source material just nails it perfectly. It lets a leader get all the credit for the spending without ever having to face the music when the bill finally arrives. And this whole dynamic leads to a really dangerous cycle. Because once a country starts taking on a lot of debt, it becomes incredibly hard to stop. The debt itself starts creating the need for even more debt. Here's how that spiral gets going. First, a government has to borrow new money just to pay back the old money it borrowed. Then, it keeps borrowing every year to cover that gap between what it spends and what it collects in taxes. And often, it'll borrow just to avoid making those painful cuts that people would protest against. Before you know it, debt isn't just for emergencies anymore. It becomes a permanent, structural part of how the government operates. So, this brings us to the end. And really, to the most important question of all. If we strip away all the big numbers and the political speeches, what is the real, actual cost to you? So the next time you hear about some big new government spending plan, just remember to ask this one simple question. Who's paying for this and when? Because if the payment isn't happening today with our taxes, it's happening tomorrow with our future. And as we've just seen, you are the future.